Hello, welcome back to Theory Hammer, fellow 40k lovers. Hope you guys are enjoying this new audio setup. I hope it sounds better. Now, I don't have a battle report today, or a unit breakdown, or a tactica, or any of that sort of stuff. Instead, today is going to be more of a discussion about Warhammer players, specifically me, and how I used to be, and how I am now. I doubt anybody will watch this for more than a minute, but whatever. If you guys like the channel, if you like the content, rage quit the like and subscribe and bell icon, check out the other videos, check out the other channel, and all that stuff. Okay, so now that I have my channel established and all that, I thought to myself, why not tell everybody about your journey? Maybe give my audience a closer look past the veil of the videos that I make. And for those of you who do not know, I really had no idea what I was doing when I started this channel. I didn't know what would get views or clicks, and I really still don't. And since I'm a pretty silly and sarcastic person at heart, I figured I'd almost make a character out of it. And the videos aren't necessarily like a performance, but I really lean into that part of my personality when I make them. And in this video, hopefully you will get a better sense of who I really am, because today we are going to discuss my journey through Warhammer and the kind of person I was and the person that I am now. I feel that my story is a lesson that people can learn from, and hopefully people can take something positive away from this. Now, in order to get started, I've got to take you back to the past, Samurai Jack, and the first thing I will say is that I'm not the person that I used to be, and the person that I used to be is not one that you would likely want to play against. So, let's break down why this was the case, and why you should not be like this. And some of this came about as the result of the player base accepting the idea of intent, rather than, exactly the way something was when you looked at it on the table. Nowadays, if your intent is to be hiding behind the building, but like part of one guy's gun is sticking out, you just tell your opponent like, hey, they're behind the wall so that you cannot see them, even like when you move over here, and then you point to, the spot on the table that their unit can move to. Your opponent shakes their head in agreement, and everyone is happy. That did not used to be the case, and I'll admit, back then, I took full advantage of that, so don't do that. When I first started becoming good at the game, so going back to like middle school days, you really had to play with precision. Distances were very static, like vehicles only moved like 6 or 12 inches with no in between. Infantry always moved either 6 or 12 inches, like if you had a jump pack you would move 12, otherwise you'd be moving 6. Regardless of the faction, charge range was exactly 6 inches and you had to get into base-to-base contact. So there was much less room for like, I should be in range. You either mathematically were, or it was mathematically impossible. And I think it's important that I start here and explain why this concept is the basis of the discussion. I would be very precise, because back then you kind of had to be. You couldn't pre-measure anything, and so you had to use the table measurements, deployment zones, and other known measurements to place and move things in a way where you knew mathematically that you would or would not be in shooting range, in charge range, things like that. Things like sticking your gun barrel around terrain, making sure that you were exactly 24.01 inches away, which makes a charge impossible, or being in range to shoot impossible, and using just geometry and math to make precise decisions. And this speaks to more like who I am as a person and how I am in my daily life. There's a reason that I got the name Kevbot. There's also a reason that I got the name Mini Hulk, but you'll have to check out the OnlyFans for that. But in short, competitive play appealed to me because it required precision to win at the high level. And I'm a very competitive person at heart, and so there was always this drive to want to be at the high level. But how did I become this way? Well, something that I don't normally tell people, and mainly because people always want to challenge you for some reason, is that I've done martial arts most of my life, specifically combat arts. And the point of me bringing this up is that understanding that kind of thing, it requires precision. It requires an understanding of distance, it requires discipline, and in a lot of cases, it requires very exact movement. And then by extension, whether I'm working with my hands or with my mind, I tend to emphasize precision and perfection, like even to this day. And that's just something that I do. It's something that I value. So once I started actually becoming good at the game, via learning the rules and how to use them to my advantage, I started to play in ways that, I guess in retrospect, kind of acted as like a gotcha for my opponents. More in the way of like, you actually can't be in range because based on the table size, where our deployment zones end, like the gap between us, how far you're allowed to move, it's actually mathematically impossible that you're in range. and then I'd have to like pull out my tape measure and then be like, see, I'm a 1/16 of an inch away from my deployment zone, and so you have to be out of range. You must have moved slightly too far, or you must have been slightly past your deployment zone during deployment. It's now the shooting phase, so you kind of can't move it now, and we'll get more into that kind of thing later on. And so this methodology, combined with simply knowing the rules better through nuance and what sort of things were legal and not legal, it created a negative sentiment among the players at local game stores. And it took me a while to understand this, because to me, it was always about this. Like, it was always about precision. At the core of the game, precision is what separated the good players from the average players. And I know what you're all thinking. I would never play against you. I know, trust me, you're not alone there. And thinking back on it, I really can't blame them. I really couldn't blame you. But at the time, I just didn't understand. You know, like, I wasn't insulting people. I wasn't being an actual dick. I was playing the game with the rules as written. We were playing in a tournament. And when I think of a tournament, I generally think of it as a more strict environment where the rules as written will be heavily enforced. And not just for Warhammer, just kind of for anything. And believe it or not, Warhammer is one of the first games I've played where even in large tournaments, you can kind of just declare your intent, and that's kind of just that. It's like, oh, you want to be slightly over an inch away from the wall? Okay. But are you actually placing the models outside of an inch? Are you actually using your tape measure to make sure every model along the wall is actually the correct distance to make your intent a reality? Or are you just eyeballing the gap and then declaring where you intend them to be, and then to save time, we just agree that they're over an inch away from the wall? To make a little comparison here, imagine going to a Magic GT and just declaring your intent rather than doing what you intend. It's not a perfect comparison, but I know that you get what I mean. You play a spell and you realize, oh, I meant to play this other spell first. Well, you can't take that back. Did you play the wrong land before casting any spells? Yeah, you can't take that back. It's just not a thing. Play in those types of events is very tight, and mistakes cannot be taken back. And that's where Warhammer deviates from other games. But what I was really doing here is I was taking something that somebody wanted to play for fun, albeit, at a tournament, and making it not fun. A lot of people did not play the way that I did. They were there to have some good, fun games, maybe win something. They were not there thinking, I need to move perfectly to win this game. You know what I mean? And then I come along, and they're just not expecting me to call them out when I tell them that they're mathematically out of range, or whatever the case may be. So issue number one was being someone who was too much of a hard ass when it came to playing the game competently. Then beyond that, now you're a rules lawyer that's getting upset at the universe because he's rolling bad. Like, I'm here to win games using precision and math. I'm not here to lose games because of horrific dice rolling for 6 or 7 turns back to back. And so this was another thing that was a negative aspect of how I used to play. I used to get legitimately upset if I would roll bad. Like, it would ruin my day kind of upset. And that's just because I took it way too seriously. And I wasn't upset at my opponent. I was just upset at the universe. Like, math says I did all the right things, and now I lose this unit because there's some bullshit. And as a side note, I will mention something that might upset some of you guys, but hopefully not too much, which is that dice rolls can indeed lose you the game. It's exceedingly rare, and usually, 95% of the time, you could have just played better. Almost always, you could have just played better. Generally speaking, dice rolls actually losing you the game is not the case, like I said, like 95% of the time. But sometimes, it absolutely is the case. And I'm not going to go into any anecdotes, but just like, for example, when the game's already really tight and you lose a really important unit because of some amazingly bad dice, if the game is tight enough, that event can just lose you the game on the spot. Like, you moved right, you targeted right, you did so for the whole game, and you're against a good opponent, and so they did the same thing. In those situations, sometimes it really just does come down to a bad dice roll. But I don't want you guys to think that I believe dice rolls are why games are lost. That's not the case. I'm simply saying that there are very specific situations where if that happens, you will simply lose. So when you lose a whole squad of Terminators to like bolter fire or something that's like close to mathematically impossible, that's what I'm talking about. And even that's not a great example, so I'm kind of getting off topic. It's super rare. It does happen though, but just don't let people tell you that you can never lose a game because of dice rolls. It's just objectively untrue. And so, getting back to me getting upset at dice rolls, whether or not I realized it at the time, that kind of attitude, it affects other people. It didn't matter that I was upset at the universe. When you're playing a game with someone and they start getting pissed off, you just feel bad. It's hard to respond to those kind of reactions, because I certainly always related when it would happen to my opponent. I'd be like, oh man, I'm sorry, like I've been there, that was bullshit, like you should have killed that unit, or whatever the case may have been at the time. And that being the case, would I want to play against someone who gets really mad at bad dice rolling? No, I wouldn't. And I wouldn't expect someone else to want to play against that person either. People can feel your energy and it affects them, and it just does. Like, when you're known as the guy who always gets pissed off when they roll bad, and then who also uses the rules to manipulate the flow of the game, I don't know if manipulate's the right word, but manipulate the flow of the game in ways that other people don't, people simply don't want to play against you. Now, were there other people like me at the time? Of course there were. But the vast majority of people I was playing against at the time didn't care to be the best player at the tournament. They wanted to win, obviously, but they just didn't take it that seriously, you know? So we have Rules Lawyer that gets mad at bad dice rolls, and I know I'm talking about past me, but I already hate whoever I'm describing. But we aren't finished yet. As I mentioned a little bit before, the next reason that I was not someone that you wanted to play against was because of takebacks. I would almost never let someone take back moves, and I didn't expect them to let me do it either. If I made a mistake was made. And it goes back to that mentality that I had about like tournaments and the setting and the environment, the strictness of it all. And remember that this was a different time, friends. A time before many of you started playing. I may not look old, but I am. I'm like 100. And the way things are now, the way that we describe sportsmanship, it's not the same as it was back then. Like, hell, I actually won a sportsmanship award at this time, if you can believe that, somehow. Being the guy who gets pissed off at dice and all the other aforementioned negative things. Nowadays, someone who behaved the way that I used to would probably be banned from a game store. And I can say that without a doubt, the current atmosphere of being a good sportsman is so much better than it ever has been, and I really hope that it stays that way. I don't know what changed in me, but I really like the casualness of just being able to say, oop, I forgot about that. Do you mind if I do this other thing instead? Because what I've come to realize is that I don't want to win the game because you forgot something. I want to win the game where we both played our best game. But that aside, I'll pivot to another topic, looking back on, I can't believe I was a part of, which is that of power gaming. And I've talked about this a little bit before, but not only was I pretty good at the time, I wanted to chase the meta. Like, I wanted to play the newest, hottest thing because it was OP, I'm competitive, I wanted to win, and that competitive mentality always took over me. I didn't want to play an army that would struggle against the newer and better things, I just wanted to play the newer and better things. And so, we're stacking it up against me here. The least enjoyable person to play against, like, in the whole fucking universe. So, you got, like, a rules lawyer, gets mad at his dice, never gives you an inch if you make a mistake, and who always tries to play the meta army. That is the piece of shit that I used to be. And I basically became the bad guy, in short. It was kind of like, oh, Kevin's here. Great. And, I could feel it. And this was at a time when I didn't quite understand why. Like, I was pretty young, I wasn't even 18 yet, because again, in my mind, I'm thinking, I don't do anything illegal in game. Like, I get mad at dice, yeah, but I mean, who doesn't? At least sometimes. Is there something wrong with playing the newest army? Like, why does everyone hate me? Is it because I'm much younger than these guys and I'm kicking their ass every time? And as I got older, and as the game became more popular, it became more and more apparent to me that the way that I was playing, the way that I was not the way that the vast majority of people wanted to play, and not the way that the vast majority of people wanted to be. Even other really good players, and even at high-level tournaments. You don't gain respect by being the best player. You gain respect by treating others the way that you want to be treated. And there's a little bit of a dichotomy here, because outside of playing a game, not really just Warhammer, just most games that I play, I'm just not the same person. And I've even described this type of thing about other players, and maybe you guys have too. Basically saying like, he's a cool dude and all, but he's just not fun to play against. That was me. That was me to a T. So, I wouldn't say that I was the gotcha guy. Maybe you guys would say that. I wouldn't necessarily say that. I definitely wasn't like a sketchy guy, but I was certainly like a joy kill guy. And frankly, looking back on it, I really hate who I used to be. And as time went on, I'd say somewhere around maybe 6th edition into 7th edition, I just started to change. I didn't want people to hate me as a 40k player. Like, I didn't want to be that guy. And so I just stopped. I stopped getting really upset at bad dice rolls. I let people take things back. I stopped trying to chase the meta and always be playing the newest, hottest thing. I stopped being this instrument of like cold, calculated precision when it came to Warhammer. It's just too goddamn stressful. And outside of Warhammer, I really am a pretty chill person, and I wanted that chill person to be the same person that I was while I was playing Warhammer. I wanted to let go of the seriousness that I had attached to the game. And it didn't happen overnight. You know, it took like an entire edition for me to change this, because it was just so baked into me since 4th edition. We're talking 10 years of playing a certain way, of being a certain way. And when it came to rules, I stopped waiting to correct someone, and I did so with respect. Instead of me saying like, it's definitely not that way, I'm 100% positive, go ahead and look for yourself, and I would be right, I would say, oh, you know, I thought it was this way, you know, I could be wrong, let's just check to make sure, because I could be wrong. I wanted to give people that level of chillness that I had outside the game. And another reason I did was because, what if I was wrong? Then I'd look like an asshole for being so confident and wrong. It's just much easier to be humble than to be confident and assertive, only to find out that you're actually wrong. And when it came to the nature of being super precise and intent and all that kind of thing, I just started accepting intent. And at the end of the day, it's easier, right? Takes less time, all that. If someone tells me now, like, these guys are supposed to be entirely behind this wall so that if you move up, you can't see them, I'll just be like, yeah, no problem at all. Or maybe I'll even like get down to the table eye level and take a look and tell them like, okay, if you just move these models, you know, slightly to the right or left, you know, then you'll be good. And then they'll do it, and then I'll take another look, and then I'll be like, great, now you're good. Or I'll even take it a step further, and I might even cut like a different angle that they didn't even think of, and just straight up tell them like, if I move this way, I will be able to see you. So maybe just move them, you know, slightly more so that I can't see them, so that there's nowhere that I can see them. And like, I would rather help them than just be like, okay, and then end up moving a different way that they didn't anticipate in order to be able to see. Because it just causes a feels bad moment. And that's what people like to see, and that's why people use intent so much now. It's part of the reason. It feels pretty shitty to have a conversation about how you intend to be invisible, but don't actually take the time to make them invisible, and then I'm just able to see you anyway. It's like, you knew what I was trying to do. Because before, like, in the past, before intent really became a thing, someone could tell me all day long that their intent was one thing or another. I expected them to go through the motions of checking and not just declaring, because that's what I did. I would declare something, but then I would also get down and I would look and I would make sure that I moved things properly. And if they didn't check thoroughly enough, and I ended up being able to see them, the mentality at the time was that your intent and your actions are two different things. But now it's just second nature. Like, if someone intends to be behind a wall from all angles that I can move, then we just assume that they're behind the wall from all angles that I can move, regardless of whether or not, you know, they scooched one or two models a quarter of an inch to actually be behind the wall. And then when it came to retracting actions and taking things back, I'll just warn people or remind them, even to the point where I will like totally reverse or ignore an entire thing. So, as a good example, I play Votann, and I have a strat where I can shoot back at you, and I'll tell people about it, and they might forget. There's 1,000 strats after all. And so they might go to shoot at me, and I'll tell them, you know, don't forget I can shoot back at you. And there's also been times where I've warned people against shooting at me during their shooting phase. They forgot, they shot me anyway, and I'm thinking like, okay, they know that I can shoot back. And I go, okay, well, I'm going to shoot back at you now, I'm going to spend 2 CP, and they go, oh, fuck, I forgot about that. And I'll just straight up be like, you can just not shoot me if you want, like, I'll just put the models back that died or whatever, I don't mind. And they'll go, yeah, like, let's do that. And I sincerely do not mind reversing that action, because it feels better to see the relieved look on my opponent's face when they realize that it's okay if they made a mistake than to see them flustered. And then when it comes to meta chasing, I just don't care. Games Workshop charges actually insane prices for their models. Like, a Land Raider Redeemer is the same kit it was from 5th edition, and it is now twice the price. It used to be $55. And none of you can convince me that it actually costs twice as much to make now. And frankly, I'd be willing to bet money that the box it comes in costs the company more than the model in the box. But more than that, I simply don't have the time or the patience to keep up with constant changes of Warhammer, and even if I did, I wouldn't want to spend my time doing that. I've done it. It's fucking exhausting. I would need to buy models all the time, build them, paint them, all to have it get changed and to have to repeat the cycle. And I just don't give a fuck about that anymore, mainly because of apathy. Like, I just don't care. I might pick up a unit or two here and there, but I will never again play Warhammer in a way where I'm forced to constantly be buying new models, to be constantly buying the newest, hottest thing. Plus, I own 3 3D printers, so there's that. And so you may ask, do I still have any of these negative tendencies? And honestly, just one, and not like I used to. But if I roll bad over and over and over, it still gets under my skin. I no longer have outbursts like I used to. Like, it's embarrassing to say, but I remember one time I threw models across the room when my plasma cannons overheated because they would kill your guys back in like whatever edition that was. It kept happening. I picked up a model and I just chucked him across the fucking room and he exploded against the wall. So the thought of doing something like that nowadays is fucking embarrassing and I'm not proud of it. But yeah, I mean, if I roll bad for an entire turn, it does become hard for me to relax, and I think that probably speaks more to something internally, but that is the truth. Now, I will say that I don't really show it as much anymore, if at all. I don't want my opponent to feel the same annoyance that I am, but it still can truly upset me, even if it takes like a lot of bad rolling before I become visibly upset or have like a mood change, and I think it probably just boils down to how competitive I am. Like, I don't know, I guess I feel like gypped or scammed or something when it does happen. I'm not really sure, but once in a while, if I continually roll bad, it will get under my skin, but I don't freak out about it anymore. It's the same thing going back to taking things too seriously. It's just not worth the stress. But there is more to be said here about the kind of player that I am now. I'm still very competitive. I love to win games, but I don't like to win games at the expense of my opponent's fun. When it comes to like takebacks, I'll always let you take something back, always, because I've realized that I want as challenging of a game as possible. I don't want to win the game because you moved something wrong and realized it during your shooting phase. I want you to play as well as you possibly can to make my game as hard as it possibly can be, because if I still win, that win is so much more sweet. And I think you all know what I mean there. You played your best game, and so did I. And that's all I want. One thing I can admit that I will never change on, which is something that I did not mention previously here, but I've mentioned it in other videos, and that is WYSIWYG and proxying. As long as the dude in the unit is like visibly different than the rest, I'm good. You said, hey, this special weapon guy here, he's a melting gun, and I'm like, bet. Like, I'm not gonna forget that, you know what I mean? I'm just not. Now, if your entire army is the same model, then not only do I not know which dude has the melting gun and the las cannon, I don't necessarily trust that you do either, but as long as there's something to differentiate them, I just don't care. WYSIWYG is just too expensive, especially in the past. Some GW kits come with all the weapon options and such now, and when that's the case, I will magnetize them, but some don't. And I wouldn't expect someone to buy the same box 3 times just to get the special weapons. I wouldn't expect someone to source the bits for the special weapons that they're missing. I admire those people who do, but I just don't think it's a realistic expectation as far as I'm concerned. Like, listen bro, I got 3 units of battle suits with a cold star. These 2 units are all Melta, commander included. This 1 unit is all burst cannons, commander included. And then even when it's like, okay, the commander has some different weapon, it's just not something that I struggle to remember. Plus, model placement is just a little less important than it used to be. You used to not be able to destroy models you could not see unless it was from like a blast weapon, so it just becomes kinda whatever a lot of the time. And I hold this belief not because I don't care if my stuff is WYSIWYG, it's because I don't care if your stuff is not WYSIWYG. I wouldn't put that expectation on my opponent, and so I wouldn't want that expectation put on me. When it comes to a grand tournament, I get it. And then when it comes to proxy, so like, if you're testing stuff, proxy all day long, and I mean it. If you want to fine-tune an army or a list, why would you go out of your way to buy all that stuff? Why wouldn't you at least get an idea of how stuff works, you know, see if it works the way that you think it will before actually buying it? So, when I play 40k now, I enter the game with a lot more casualness. If I make a mistake, I'm like, well, oh well. And if someone else makes a mistake, I'll ask them, like, do you want to put that unit somewhere else? Do you want to do something else? Like, I really don't mind. And sometimes they say no, and I'll go, you know, okay, well, let me know if you change your mind, because I really don't mind. It's allowed me to enjoy the game a lot more. trying to play really high-level Warhammer is just fucking stressful for me, because I get too into it, and I start to take it too seriously, and since I know myself well enough, I know that I'm just going to end up not enjoying it. Even if my opponent does, I just don't want to feel that way when I'm playing the game. I've been playing this game for close to 20 years. I've won GTs in the past. I've gone top 16 at super majors, although I've never won any. I've won countless local tournaments. Like, I've met the best people, the best players in the country. And at this point in my career, I just want to have fun. I don't need to prove to myself that I can be good at the game, because I've done that in the past. And when it comes to 10th edition, I'm really just not great at keeping like 100 different possibilities in my head at once. And I'm not saying that as a complaint. I'm just admitting that I'm not good at it. And I've said that there's too much unpredictability in 10th, and I say that from my perspective. When I think about 10th edition, this is what I think. I think, okay, the mission's random. The terrain layout's going to be random. Secondaries are going to be random. My dice rolls are random. Strat usage is random. Abilities are not always consistent, like with reactive moves and that kind of stuff. And when I try to put it all together from my personal perspective, I just start to lose sight of all of it. Are you going to reactive move if I move too close? If I don't, then you can rapid ingress over here, so maybe I stay put. And things like that, they just tend to cloud my judgment enough where I end up making mistakes over and over, and frustratingly, I don't seem to learn from them, because it's like the next time I'm in the exact same situation, something different happens. And so I like having rigid, structured things where I only need to consider a handful of things at once. So kind of a little tangent there, but to bring it all together, here's the lesson that I intend to teach anyone watching. Don't be a rules lawyer. Know the rules, but be respectful. Don't get upset when you roll bad. Being annoyed happens, but becoming irate will ruin the game. If someone makes a mistake, ask them if they want to do something different. When it comes to meta chasing, if you want to do that, that is your prerogative. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with doing that, but you probably will not be reaching your full potential by doing that, because you're always jumping around like a fucking pogo stick, and you're never going to truly master any faction during that edition. If I could go back in time and see myself in like 4th and 5th edition, I'd probably slap myself in the face. And I think it takes a lot of courage to admit your faults and that you were wrong. And I think it probably takes an even stronger person to have the willpower to change their behavior and to become someone that is starkly different than they used to be. Everyone makes mistakes, you know? I do, and I'm quick to admit it. Nowadays, I compliment everybody with sincerity. I make an effort to show people that I'm just not the person that I used to be, and I show them through action. And I've taken this change with me to other parts of my life, except when I play video games. Video games just trigger me sometimes, so check out the second channel if you want to see that. And through these changes, I'm just a lot more happy in life than I used to be. When someone points out a flaw or provides a good point, I find it a lot more appealing to consider what they said. Hell, even in some of the videos I make about units and such, many of you are quick to point out things that I forgot to mention or things that I might get wrong, and I really mean this when I say I appreciate that kind of thing, because I look at that as an opportunity to learn and to grow and to gain different perspectives. As a personality trait, I'm a lot less inclined to double down when someone makes an objectively good point, and I kind of just see it as like a, why would I do that? If you make a good point, you make a good point. And not only does that help to change my perspective, it displays a level of respect for other people's thoughts and opinions. And I like to think that people enjoy having conversations when someone is agreeable rather than disagreeable because of, stubbornness or whatever. Kind of a tangent, but yeah. So my advice here is just have fun with it. Don't take it too seriously. It is a game at the end of the day. It is a hobby that you're supposed to enjoy. And you don't want to be like I used to be, because people will just not want to play against you. So hopefully, I can be an example to someone here. I know I've said a lot of negative things about myself, but I don't mind. This was meant to be a positive video, because I'm not like that anymore, and I'm never going to return to that place. I made this video as a way to use myself as an example, and if you're having a hard time of it like I used to, things can get better. It may require some self-reflection, but like I said, none of us are perfect. But what's not okay is being apathetic to your own destructive behavior, during a Warhammer game or otherwise. So I hope you guys got something out of this discussion. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like these more casual videos, let me know. I'll be more than happy to talk more about just random life things, if that is something that you give a shit about from some random guy on the internet. but it would be probably something I'd post over on the Power Fisters channel if I do that. I'll probably keep this channel dedicated to 40k topics, even if they are like a different kind of video like this. But either way, guys, thunderhammer those YouTube buttons, check out the other channel, the other videos, make sure you theory hard, and I will see you wonderful 40k lovers back at the lab.